here to share with you our corporate strategy, which is aimed to set out what we are going to do as ICCAN over the next 2 years. Some of the things that we're going to propose to do will be things that we expect and hope to complete within that 2-year period. Others will be much more long term, because 2 years is a short time in the aviation industry, as I think we've all learned very, very quickly. But actually, some of the issues we're dealing with are not short-term issues, they're long-term issues. So it's really important that we're able to set out long-term work that will actually deliver long-term solutions. I think that's very clear to us all, is there's not quick fixes. It's about how do we change cultures, how do we change the way things are done over a period of time. So I thought about what shall I share with you today with our corporate strategy, and I thought, well, actually, most of you will have either read it or will be reading it while I'm speaking, so there's no point parroting the contents of the strategy. So I thought what I would do is share with you what we've been doing over the last few months, because that's really what has led to the corporate strategy.
Did you learn that all?
Yeah. This is the issues that we have to deal with.
Don't know.
Yeah, probably is actually. So, as I said, our strategy will deal with what we just heard. Well, we hope so. When we were formed, now let's go back. We were originally talked about being formed about 5 or 6 years ago with the Airports Commission report. I'm sure you're all aware of that. And we had various names and various likely responsibilities before we were finally thrust into the world at the latter part of last year as ICCAN. And effectively, when Sam and I got together and started looking at the detail, well, we had a few blanks of sheets of paper, and we thought, well, we better look and see what we can make of this. So we could have actually just drafted a corporate strategy there and then at the turn of the year. We would have been able to take account of the government publications, the terms of reference that we've been given, and to basically put out what we thought were the key issues. We could have done that, but we didn't. Because actually we thought it was really important to go out and actually talk and listen to as many people as we could over the forthcoming months of the year. And that's what we've done. So we've been to airports, we've talked to airports, we've talked to airlines, we've talked to communities, we've talked to individuals, we've talked to pressure groups, we've talked to academics, we've talked to trade bodies, we've talked to regulators, we even talked to DFT occasionally as well, just to keep the balance in there. In fact, we tried to talk to as many people as we can. We hoped, and we still will continue doing that, we hope by the end of the summer to have talked to and visited more than the top 20 airports, talked to all the major UK airlines, talked to as many community groups as we can fit in that time, and also loads of trade bodies. And the reason why we did that is because we wanted to understand the issues, the weight of the issues, and crucially, the regional differences that there are. Because noise is a problem in Clydebank, but it's different to what it is in other parts of the country. So we went to Clydebank to experience that with community members in Glasgow. When we went to Aberdeen, it was like going to a different planet. Because it wasn't just an airport, it was airports and helicopters, and God, it was like one of those films from Avatar, shots from Avatar or something, or that busy. It was so different to what we'd seen before. We go to the small regional airports, Southampton or Leeds Bradford, and it's again a different experience because smaller number of flights, but it's still involving people. It's still involving lives and how that impacts them. And then of course we've been to Heathrow, we've been to Gatwick. Later this week we actually go to Manchester as well, and we see the dynamics of the bigger airports too. And we wanted to feel and understand those issues before we put together our strategy, because we thought it was really important. It was really important to come and meet Sally's group and actually just sit around, a few of us, and actually hear those personal experiences. It's been really important to do that in other parts of the country, in Edinburgh, and feel their issues. Also really important to look at the economic dynamics that are faced by the industry. Excuse me. We were in Northern Ireland just last week, and actually understanding the issues that the international airport and the city airport faced, and realising that their biggest problem was the competition they faced from Dublin, who don't actually play by the same rules as they do. So that actually gave us a huge view of the issues that have been faced by the industry, what is possible, and so we can shape what we do for the future. Excuse me, I've got a really tickly cough. So when we look at our strategy, we've taken account of all those conversations, all those things we've seen, and we've tried to make sure that what we are going to propose is going to be, one, doable, and two, things that are going to make long-term changes. There's no point having a great ideological agenda, we're going to change the world, if you can't deliver it. It's a sad reflection of my reality of what I've had over the last 20 years or so, both in local government and other areas. If you can't deliver your agenda, then it doesn't matter how damn good your agenda is, it's dead in the water. So we have to play the internal game of making sure that we can get things through that are going to stick, are going to make a difference. So that's a little bit of background of how we got to today. So, based on our engagement, broadly based on the role envisaged by the government's aviation strategy, and yeah, we had to take account of the terms of reference that we were given as well. But actually, to us, that is really important, because the things that we have learnt over the last 4 or 5 months is that there are two really big issues that must be resolved. The first is that lack of trust. Lack of trust between regulators, between communities, between airports, actually to some degree even between airports and airlines. That lack of trust has to change. The second one is consistency, or should I say the lack of consistency, because there isn't much. Everyone does it their own way, everyone produces data that they think is right, and there isn't that consistent approach across the country. So if you're in Southend and you're bothered by Southend Airport, you would expect to be able to access the same information, the same mitigation measures, if that was relevant, as someone in Manchester, for example. But that isn't the case. That can't be right. Can't be right, can it? Because if you have the same level of noise in different parts of the country, then you should feel there is that fairness around the country. Clearly that isn't the case at the moment. So consistency is going to be crucial, and that is going to take time to do, to change. And when you reflect on where we are, I think, I could do with one of those DeLorean cars. So we go back in time and actually buy a bit more time, because the first thing is, it would have been really helpful if we had been established 2 years ago. I've been able to do more preparation for the airspace management that's coming before us, but we are where we are. It would have been really helpful to go back a bit further in time and shape some of the things that have happened over the last 10 or 20 years, because we'd be in a better position now. But we are where we are, and we've got to actually look forward, not look back. So our strategy is quite clear, is that we can't change the past, but we can shape the future, and that is crucial. And we want to focus everyone towards a better future. And our challenge to the industry is, yes, you've done things in the past. Yes, you probably got away with more than you should have done in the past, but that will not sustain you in the future. So you have to do things different. Our challenge to the industry as a whole will be, there is technology there, but there has to be a drive to increase that pace of bringing in quieter planes. And using those technologies, it should not take as long to get from somebody coming up with a good idea to it actually coming into place. So whether that is a modification on an aeroplane that makes it quieter, or whether that is airspace management itself that could make things better. So we've got to have a situation where that pace of change is better. So many people have told us, airports, airlines, communities, that when proposals go into CAA, no one really knows whether ever they're going to see the light of day again. And that's not good for confidence of anyone. Because if you put forward an idea and the airport says, yeah, that's a good idea, I wish we'd thought of that, but we didn't, so we'll process this. You go through the process of getting it to the doors of the regulator, and then it disappears, then that just breeds mistrust. Doesn't matter who you are, it breeds mistrust in the system. So I would argue, and we would argue, that the system, because of its processes, is failing people. We need to change that. So, improving public confidence will be crucial, and I think we can do that, because I think we can prove that we're prepared to listen to everyone, and we're prepared to actually start and work to get a baseline. Because it can't be right that everyone's working from different positions. So we've got to have a baseline about what's right and what isn't right, and how we move forward. So that takes us to our first objective, which is increased trust and transparency. How will we do that? Well, we see, despite whatever has been produced by DFT, CAA and anybody else, we don't see and we don't feel that clarity from everyone about how to do things. So we will produce guidance for airports on how they should be consulting with and engaging with their communities, so that we can get that consistency about how communities are engaged with their airports. There's some good practice, there's some not so good practice, there's some improvements, there's some that haven't improved. We need consistency across everyone. And to do that, we will focus also on airspace management in terms of how best that they should, through the airspace management process, modernisation process, how airports should actually be engaging on that as well. But it will not just be that. There needs to be a norm engagement process as well. We'll also look at data and information, and every airport will tell you they produce all the data they need to do, and it's in a big 85-page document that they produce on a regular basis. Well, I don't read 85-page documents over breakfast usually, and I'm sure nobody else does. Information and data has to be in a form that actually people can read, understand and take in over breakfast. Not something that is a thick statistic-based document. That still needs to be there, but you need to produce your information in a digestible format. So we will offer guidance on that as well. And the third area is how communities should engage. Because every community we've met, and I'm sure all today, you didn't get a manual when you walked through that first door. Well, how do we deal with this? But actually, how do communities get the best out of the engagement they have with their airports? Well, we will try and help you to do that, and we'll provide guidance so that the better methods and the more successful areas are shared. Because sharing good practice has to be a core of what we do. So we will also review sonar. At the end of the day, I'm not going to get into debate about that. All I'll say is, I think it was 30 years since the previous one, or something like that. You can't go on like that. It's about that baseline. So a sonar or a son of sonar, or whatever you want to phrase it, needs to be set in place to be done in the next few years. And that isn't the end of it. It needs then to be a regular program. So that's what we will pursue. We'll look at what needs to change about the methodology of the last one, and we want to set in a program so that it's done on a regular basis. When I say regular, I'm thinking of at least 5 to 10 years, and certainly no more than 10 years, that would be my view. I personally would go nearer 5. We need to just try and get our minds around noise metrics and the best way of actually producing something which everyone can have confidence in. Because at the moment, it's so inconsistent, people don't. And the two factors, we talk about frequency, we talk about average noise, but actually change isn't measured. Change I've faced is don't really notice Leeds Bradford Airport from where I live most of the time, but suddenly the winds, and we've got a lot of easterly winds, and suddenly all the planes are coming around again. Probably didn't notice that before, but I do now. And it's that change factor that makes such an impact to communities. So we have to have a suite of metrics that actually take account of everyone's issues. And that's going to be tough, I'll be honest with you, because there's no easy solution to that one, but we need to work on it. And talk a little bit about long-term issues, and the health effects is long-term, and we need to look at where the gaps are in the health research. We need to look at the areas where we think we can make firm conclusions, and we need to try and progress that agenda. It's, again, inconsistent. And the academics that we've spoken to who've been involved in health effects of noise, I think feel like they've been working a little bit in isolation and a little bit frustrated. And I think we need to look at how we begin to bring the health effects of noise into mainstream. And I think we can do that over time with the right framework around that. So objective 2, I talk so much about consistency, and it is a big issue, but the other issues there is that accountability. There has to be more accountability. It's too easy, and it's wrong actually, that an industry can work without being responsible. I know no other industry who would not be accountable and feel that relationship with its customers and its communities. And I think there's a willing to change that, where we need to create the climate for that change. So we need to look at the operational procedures. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of that. There are all sorts of things that can be done to change things. Some of that's not always for the better, but we do need to look at those. We need to look at planning guidance. We've already met with the Chief Planner. I'll say no more other than it was an interesting discussion and showed us how planning has developed or not in terms of the aviation industry. And I think we need to look at how planning is sharpened up to the issues that are faced by communities, and particularly the situation with local authorities and their plans, local plans, which seem to be at the end of the process. We will need to take a view on regulation, on what works, what doesn't work, and how that would need to change. Again, long process behind that, because regulation needs parliamentary time. And just getting parliamentary time is an issue in itself, even to get the government to agree with you. And then we need to look at the whole issues around mitigation, about enforcement, and how do we incentivize change. And I think the incentivization of change is a big area, and it works on many levels. So how do we incentivize airlines to ensure all their operating procedures are the most noise efficient? I won't answer that question because it's a really important one. It's difficult for all the airlines to do that. How do we create the environment where the consumer, who is going to be getting on that airliner, makes an environmental and noise choice rather than just a cost and destination choice when they book that flight? The answer is they don't, and everything again is inconsistent and piecemeal in terms of that agenda now. But could we get into a situation where a consumer has a choice to choose a quieter aircraft? If they did, it would drive change with the airlines. It would drive more quieter planes. And that's about changing behaviours over a long time and putting power back in the hands of people rather than the organisations doing it for them. All sorts of areas on behavioural change we could look at. That's just a couple to look at. So strategic objective 3 is to establish our expertise, authority and credibility. Well, if we can't establish that, we can't learn anything else. That's the bottom line. In any organisation, you've got to learn, you've got to earn the right to actually be able to land hard messages. And so how we build our expertise, how we establish ourselves and the confidence of all players in the aviation noise and wider establishment will be crucial. And when we do speak and we do comment, we will have to make sure that we are going to be able to land that message with and not get one wrong. And to do that, well, we're going to be engaged in the modernisation process so that we will have a constant information of what's going on, but also we will shape and try to shape the right outcomes. So that our agenda on airspace modernisation is that every scheme should be looking at noise reduction. Not obviously, can't all do it for everywhere, but there has to be a net noise reduction for those schemes. In terms of planning inquiries, I hope or feel there'll be more of those in the future. Our opportunity again to demonstrate there is a body there who will actually command the noise agenda. The opportunities we get to advise the Secretary of State on calling decisions and others will be crucial in terms of how we shape our influence with government. And if you haven't got influence with government, then making those key changes is going to be really much harder. So in terms of what we are seeking to do, is we are seeking to change the whole way that noise is managed from aircraft in the UK, which is a huge agenda. The way we're going to do that, and the way this strategy sets that out, is by actually building the confidence so that we can, one, deliver the simple, short messages, the guidance, and then we can move on to the bigger stuff, which is behavioural change, which is regulatory change, which is actually challenging how the old process goes. And I think if we do that, we can then build those two things that I talked about at the start. One, confidence. Because if people and organisations don't have confidence in the system and trust in the system, then it's only going one way. And the second is consistency. Because there isn't a consistent approach. You might have been able to get away with that 20 or 30 years ago, but we all live in a digital age. Hi, there was on camera. All live in a digital age, actually, so information will be passed. So you can't get away with that in the same way in the past, as you used to in the past. So the challenge that we have to do, and we have to deliver, is that to convince all the stakeholders that actually the status quo is not an option. So that change is required from everyone. So we make no apology for the fact that we will challenge airlines, we will challenge airports, we will challenge government, we will challenge regulators, and we will challenge communities to actually change, to ensure that we get better outcomes for everybody. Because aviation has an agenda to grow. That is not sustainable without change. That is not sustainable without making sure that noise is accounted for and a big determinant in excuse me, in the boardrooms of airlines and airports. That's the big game we're playing for, so that noise actually is number one on the agenda when it comes to decisions throughout the industry. I think that will start to change the culture of the whole debate, hopefully. So, in terms of the practicalities, before my voice totally backs in, deadline is the 17th of June, so please send your comments back to us. I think we've already had quite a few, which is really helpful, and don't think it has to be technical. It's really helpful to have some straightforward things, practical stuff. It isn't the finished article, it's a draft. We want to learn as much as we can, so please send any comments you have back to us. It's really helpful, and the comments we've had already have been really helpful. I think I just want to really thank you all for coming today, and now we'll go into questions, which will mean my commissioners can give my voice a rest because it's about to back up, and to say thank you for taking interest in our strategy.
So we're going to pass the mic to anyone who wants to ask a question. You can say who you are if you would, and even if you're from an organisation or a group, which group you belong to, that'd be really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Who wants to go first? So, Peter first.
Peter Barclay, and I'm the chairman of the Gatwick Area Conservation Campaign. Interesting, you commented on the regulator, the CAA, and this does apply, of course, to other government departments as well. Do you feel you're going to be in a position to really put pressure onto those organisations whose very common excuse when we ask for things is, well, I'm sorry, we haven't got the staff, we haven't got the resources. So you need to put pressure on government to provide those resources. Do you think you can really start to influence that?
Yes, over time. At the moment, a nice little body that DFT has created to solve all their problems. Well, I said, I said it up from day one. I said it to the aviation minister and every DFT person I've met. We will challenge everybody, including DFT, and I think we need to, because it has to be different. And if I got my DeLorean and I went back to the 60s, you wouldn't design it like this, would you? You wouldn't have a system where you've got 3 airports whose noise is regulated by the Secretary of State and the rest do it themselves. You wouldn't design a situation where you put in regulatory powers to councils who haven't got the resource to do their normal functions, never mind properly regulate an airport. You wouldn't have those ownership and regulatory conflicts in any other industry, as we have in aviation. So and that will take time it takes time to change all the things, but we need to move the regulation agenda forward. And when we produce that work, it will challenge people because it will be difficult for certain bodies. But we make no apology for that. It's needed if we're going to move forward.
Colin, Simon, Howard, do you feel the need to add to anything that Robert says? Please, just leave in. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rob, for that introduction. My name is Peter Wood and I chair the Richmond Heathrow campaign. We have 2,000 or more members. My question to you is, can you see a way of getting noise onto a legal framework, for example, as air quality is, because without that, I'm not sure how much we can achieve, and I think it personally would be marvellous if we could try and achieve that.
If my colleagues will have a go at that one. So for me, I think the public health agenda and how you translate noise into a biological effect on people's public health, and when you can express it like in those terms, so sleep being the obvious one, is there an actual biological effect by sleep deprivation not being a... Yes, there is, and it's proven, and there are links. And when you can try and get it onto that public health agenda, I think we've seen, say, with diesel, we were all encouraged to go and get diesel cars because they're better fuel. Pollutants, particulates, there's an issue here. And I think when you can express it in that it becomes a public health issue, then you effectively weaponise it. Because when it becomes a public health issue, it becomes an NHS issue. And the single biggest expense this country has is the NHS. And when you can link things together like that through the public health agenda, that if you address this and the public health improves, you will cost the NHS less money. And when you can express it in those sort of terms, then I think you can do exactly what you say. But you've got to get it into that term. Just saying noise per se, but it has to be what are the causes of it. What does it do not only to the individual but also to the public person? Then I think you can.
Just to put that into perspective, about 20 odd years ago I was at a planning inquiry and I raised the issues of air quality about this site, and it was just thrown out because we've not an issue, don't really need to do environmental assessments and whatnot. This was quite a huge development. That area now where that development is an air quality improvement zone. And all the issues that I've raised are what people accept now as planning issues. So it's a long game, and I see as noise. It's behind air quality, but it's actually moving forward. And I think the more that health data helps and research helps us in that agenda, I think it will mean that we can move that forward in the years to come.
Margaret Majonda from Ealing Aircraft Noise Action Group. Towards the end of your remarks, you said that you're setting out to convince stakeholders that the status quo is not an option. Well, the status quo suits Heathrow and the DFT, and no doubt the airlines too, very well indeed. The DFT, for instance, decided, despite what was first recommended, that you wouldn't have actual authority. So is it achievable to start persuading Heathrow and the government that the status quo has really got to change, and if so, how are you going to do it?
Well, I think the one thing that we've done over the last few months, and we'll continue to do, is talk to so many people in different parts of the industry and different stakeholders. And I would argue that ICCAN now, and certainly will have by the end of the summer, the most comprehensive view of the issues facing aircraft noise and the aviation industry of anybody. Comprehensive UK view. Because I don't think anyone else has had those conversations on such a wide range of stakeholders. And we said, and we were being encouraged to by the previous minister to put forward our proposals at the end of our 2-year period as what we think needs to change. So and that will be based on what we managed to change and the willingness of stakeholders to change in those 2 years after we put things forward, and those who've not been willing to change. And those recommendations were shaped on that. So we will put forward to ministers, or the minister of the day, what we think needs to change in terms of regulation and enforcement. And I think and I don't want to prejudge anything, but I think we will need to make a strong case to say that enforcement isn't working at the moment, therefore it needs to be different. I don't want to go any further than that at this stage, because I don't want to prejudice any work that we do.
but I think there's enough evidence to show that.
Sorry.
Sally Pavey, I'm Chair of Communities Against Gatwick Noise Emissions. You say lots of positive things about rebuilding the trust, and the modernisation of airspace was mentioned as well. On Friday, the Aviation Minister announced in the media that she is allowing aircraft to fly outside of MPRs for greener, more efficient, so that more leisure travel can go up in the air and more resilience. Now, the problem with the whole process is that you only consult people that are already impacted by aircraft noise. What she announced on Friday is basically flying over new people who will be completely oblivious to this whole process, completely never impacted by aircraft noise before, whatever the wind is doing. They've never had aircraft noise. Now, these people have not had a voice in any of the consultations, and it's one of the big issues we have at Gatwick with their FASI's implementation south currently, is that they are only consulting noise groups. They're not consulting anybody else, and yet, come stage 2, they have removed noise preferential routes from their document. Now, that is fundamentally wrong, that these people who are completely oblivious to the whole process of aircraft noise could now find themselves impacted and will not be engaged into stage 3 of the consultation. So how can ICCAN resolve these issues? Because as you rightly say, you needed to be full 2 years ago, but how can you help now?
So just to clarify, Sally, they're consulting with the existing noise groups, but the newly exposed don't have a voice yet, and there is no general public consultation, is that the point?
There will be a general public consultation at stage 3, but this was a national announcement made by Baroness Vera on Friday, saying that aircraft will be allowed to fly anywhere if it's a far more direct route to the destination.
I think it's very similar to local plans and planning permissions. Most people do not engage with the strategic end of local plans because, frankly, it's all over there somewhere and most people aren't really involved. But as soon as people see this, the little green notice or the yellow notice or the blue notice on a field, then suddenly everybody engages and suddenly up is armed. And then, frankly, what is said is, well, I'm terribly sorry, you should have engaged with us at a much earlier stage, then you could have had some influence in this process. So I think if there's a role for us, it is trying to get people to engage earlier, to get people to understand that this could impact them. Can you achieve that? Well, 40 years of local plans hasn't done it. So that's actually really difficult because until you can touch and feel it and see it, most people don't engage. It's just the nature of human nature, and that's a real challenge. But maybe aspects of the fact that we exist, there's a website, it's a resource, people can access it. If we express ourselves in terms that people can understand as opposed to gobbledygook, then actually maybe people can work out how to engage with us at that earlier stage. But it's very tricky because until people can touch and feel it, they don't get involved.
And it's precisely, isn't it? It's one of the inconsistencies that Rob's talked about, and where ICCAN can perhaps be a catalyst in demonstrating that and actually reflecting that back to whether it be the Minister or others as well. So not easy, absolutely not easy. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, isn't it? Not easy, but it's absolutely the sort of thing that ICCAN needs to be addressing.
So we've got one comment on this side of the room and 2 on the other side. I'll come to in a moment.
Yeah, and Chris from Windsor and Maidenhead, I also represent the Strategic Planning Group. And forgive me, I'm going to ask a loaded question. It's going to be blatantly obvious. So in the absence of the DeLorean, it echoes the comments around the room now about great to have this up and running 2 years ago, but I'm not sure whether the Commissioner is aware there are groups at the moment with almost exactly the same targets, strategic targets as the group that's being set up, i.e. how can you enable growth and protect communities against noise, with the real-time example being the third runway, biggest infrastructure project of a generation. I'm fortunate to be a member of a cross-party group, airlines, community groups, local authorities, all the rest of it sitting around a table, independently chaired by the Noise Abatement Society, looking at noise envelope design, so basically how you enable that growth and protect communities. Is there value, that's my question now, is there value in ICCAN perhaps being a silent partner in that process to really explore in real-time terms how that thinking evolves, because we almost to the month we are mapping our targets to your own, and it just struck me as a real opportunity to be grabbed.
I think we're open to a dialogue with different bodies like that to see how we can have mutual beneficial cooperation. I'm not proud, I'll talk to anybody basically. And if we can work with people to get the right answers and the right outcomes, I don't care who it is, we're prepared to do it. And I think it's about looking for what is the best outcomes, and then actually convincing others that we can get some actually sort of momentum behind those changes. So we'll welcome that opportunity.
Just to add a little flesh to that, I mean, noise envelopes are a concept that we've heard about from government now for many years, but this is actually trying to work out what this actually means in practice.
Yeah, bipartisan to us, it's not any political group, it's not biased for the airlines or the DfT, it's a group of people who would normally butt heads in a courtroom trying to come up with a sensible and target that everyone can agree to, so it broadly matches your own aim. So
one of the things that I think we have with our status as a body with influence but not power, if you want to be harsh about it, is that we can be a great catalyst for change, and we might not be able to deliver as many things as we want to do, but we can actually create the climate for those to be delivered, and that, to my mind, fits into that role.
Yeah. Simon, you wanted to come in?
I come at this for being an engineer by background. I always look back to what's the data, how can we change things based on agreed or irrefutable facts. And I think that what Colin talked about, we've already heard several times now that there are large gaps in research between noise impact and the long-term health effects. We live at a time where communities and society is faster at changing things and attitudes than governments are. You've only got to look at even what's happening in terms of the air pollution side, the carbon emissions side of aviation. The public opinion is changing that way faster than governments are doing right now. But at the moment, we don't have noise considered in the same way. It's certainly considered amongst the communities here because you're people who feel impacted by it. But I don't hear children going on the news and saying, I'm not sleeping at night because I'm worrying about the noise that I'm going to get tomorrow morning. I do hear children going on the news and saying, I'm worried about what the carbon emissions are doing to the community. So I think it'll be a very important part of our work is to provide some of that basis. I have faith in the industry in terms of the designers and the aircraft manufacturers. They will find the best way of doing the right thing if they're driven the right way. So far, noise reduction has been very significant. Noise reduction in terms of generation at source of the aircraft has been very significant, but it's been a complete byproduct. Yes, there have been ICAO, the various chapters that have brought down the regulation, but actually the fact that aircraft have got the fact that the NEO now, the new 320s, are so much quieter than their previous aircraft is a byproduct of fuel efficiency, because that's been driven by the economics of the industry. I think we need, one of the key bits of work that we will be able to do is to try and fill those gaps and to start to bring the public health agenda, exactly as Colin said, onto the part. Therefore, people start to make decisions based on health impact of noise, and that will start to drive the economics of the industry, and then you will start to see both the government desire to actually regulate one way or another the impact of noise on communities, which at the moment, as I say, is largely a byproduct.
Okay, so 2 questions down the front.
Oh, thank you. I'm Maureen Corder, and I'm from Plainhill Action, we're South East London. I just find actually the presentation is hopefully going to be helpful to us all in the end, but it's quite depressing because I just don't see how you can then you can do what you say you're going to do. One thing I wanted to say was, you say you represent, or you not represent, you come from West London, you come from Bradford, you're going to be walking. Some of us who live in part of London, in the centre, in the southeast, we suffer from noise from two airports at very low overflight. So say below 4,000 feet, we get London City Airport flights, and we get London Heathrow flights. And what these airports are doing is they're switching their airspace, the use of the same airspace in fact, depending on the wind. But there is no point in time when we get any relief from noise. And it's not only noise, it's all the pollution, the particulates and the dirt that's on our homes as well. Because these are very low flying planes, they're, as I say, 3,500 and 2,000 feet. And very often they're both in the sky at the same time, crossing one another over and going to. So are you going to be looking at how the airports interact with each other? Because I've actually been to London City Airport, spoken to the CEO there, and he's just not at all interested in helping us. And he's placing all his trust in quiet planes. And of course, PBN, etc., is all coming in. And how are you going to get around to PBN? You know, it's all going to be there. Joint points are all going to be at the same place because it's safety critical. How are you going to get them to do something about that, to relieve the noise on these people?
For some reason, there's no duty on airports to cooperate. I think anyone who knows anything about local government knows that when the duty to cooperate was introduced on local plans, it completely changed the way that councils did their local plans. They suddenly stopped putting all the contentious stuff on their borders and started actually realising if they did that, they'd fall out with their neighbours. So they had to do things differently. And I think that's a big mistake, and we've said that to a number of both government, DFT and other regulators, that actually if you want to make airspace modernisation work, then there has to be a duty to cooperate between airports. And clearly there are opportunities to sort out some real conflicts if everyone's looking at it as a whole area and the impact on the individuals rather than just airport by airport. I'm hopeful that certainly NATS certainly have got that message and that they need to look at things rather than in chunks, but they have to have that strategic overview and that actually looks at overall impact. I don't know if colleagues got any other views.
No, I concur with that, but I was just also thinking the whole PBN debate is going to impact across all. It has to be looked at in the round, doesn't it? There's no way you can look at it individually. So now there's a meeting at City Airport where they were precisely talking about the problems and difficulties they face because the noise they get complained the people complaining quite often the flights coming to Heathrow. So that cross-border implication is very, very important. I hear what you say and I understand your frustration. I don't think we're being naive. I think what we said is it's a real challenge, but we are confident that we're, new kids on the block, that we can make a difference, we will make a difference, particularly for working in harness with other colleagues, community organisations and others who want the same change agenda.
Because it's this thing of consultation that, we are not able to undo things that have been done to us in the past 2 years because it requires consultation. And this will take another 2 or 3 years, and new people may be affected, or previously affected people will be re-affected. They're going to have to be consulted. So there's a 2-year period or 2 or 3 year period where within London we have been imprisoned in noise, and it's going to be very hard for you to undo that for us now. Very hard.
No, I hear what you're saying, absolutely.
Yeah, you're saying you can, so we can hold you to that.
We're certainly going to try.
Well, we hope that. I think you've got to be optimistic. But do you look at airspace modernisation as bottle half full or bottle half empty? I think you look at it both ways. We would try and look at it bottle half full, and that there's going to be opportunities to make things better for some communities. There's going to be the opportunities to sort out some of the rather strange situations that have developed because no one's looked at it strategically, airspace and how it's used. Equally, some of those solutions will be worse for people, and we've got to be honest about that. But I think we need to actually make sure that that is open, so that when the decisions are made, then it's done in the light of all the impacts.
Bridget, you had a question as well.
Yes, Bridget Bell from Plainhead Action as well. I wanted to ask about this, how you're going to let everybody know about these opportunities to consult. A little bit like you were saying at Gatwick. Until you're impacted, you don't even know there's an aeroplane. And that's precisely what's happened to many of us in South East London. Overnight, you wake up and you find something has changed. We didn't even know there was a chance to consult. It doesn't matter for all the information you've got on your website, until you know there's an aeroplane and what it can do to you, you won't even begin to look at your website, you won't even know about you. It's taken 2 years of real uphill to try and find out any way through the morass of the different people who are making these changes without any sort of accountability.
I don't want to prejudice what we're going to put in our guidance to airport about how they consult with communities. But I think it would be remiss of us not to include a section on communities who have previously not been overflown but might be in the future, and suggest ways that airports should engage with those communities.
But we said that before the last consultation to Heathrow, and they took no notice.
Exactly, but I mean, we are where we are in terms of a timescale. We will produce our guidance, and as I say, to be comprehensive guidance, I think it would have to cover those communities. And I think the powerful message to the politicians will be, if you don't actually realise that, you don't wake up to the issue that this is probably the most difficult issue because it's change. And when you become newly overflown, that's where, and the evidence shows this, that's where most people are protesting. So it would be remiss of politicians not to take account of that view when we put that guidance forward.
I also challenge that sometimes we're not even consulted, change happens and that's it. And as Mo was saying, we have to wait 2 years in order to have any sort of voice, but any of the industry can make a change when it suits them. And again, there is no accountability for that.
I think that a lot more changes have to go through consultation and follow CAA guidance than they ever used to. I think the question is the visibility and the transparency of some of those proposals.
And just one last thing I wanted to say is that you're going to challenge everybody, including communities. I'd say we're pretty challenged already by what's happening to us, so what are you going to level at us next?
Not in terms of the noise you have to go through, but I'm thinking challenge you to look at the way you can be more effective and actually help. And
pushing water uphill.
Well, aren't we all in that one in some ways? But we've got to change the debate. We've got to change the debate to get outcomes that are going to benefit everyone. And we say I've said this to airports, is communities say to us, well, it doesn't matter what happens, the airport always wins.
Yeah.
Well,
yes.
and I don't think no one's going to tell me any different in this room tonight, I'm sure. And that's what we've heard throughout the country. Well, that's got to change.
You have to challenge the community and you need to share the noise. That's who you have to challenge.
Now.
Yes.
Okay.
Not the ones who are already receiving it.
So I've got 2 comments on this side of the room. We've also had 2 comments that have come in by the online system. So if I could put these questions to you all. So these are anonymous, I think. Is that right? We don't have an indication who they've come from.
There's 2 anonymous and there's one from Terry from TAG.
Right. Okay. So we've got 3. So I'll do them one at a time. Do it as a quick fire question round, and then we'll carry on with questions on this side. So Terry from Terry's Action Group asks, what are you doing to ensure that stats on noise pollution are simple to understand for folks affected by noise?
I think I mentioned earlier, we've got to change it so that the stats and the data that's published is in a comprehensive way. And the argument we've made is in a clear way. And the argument we said to airports is, look, you want to be able to tell us you want to engage with the communities properly, but then you send them or you publish a load of information in a way that people can't understand. So you've got to change. And then you complain because one or two people actually have the time and the expertise to actually interrogate those stats and come out and challenge you on it. You say, oh, it's just one or two people. Well, it's not the case, because actually all you're doing is meaning that only a small number of people have got that technical competence to challenge you on that. So if you want to properly engage your community, you've got to produce stuff in a format that communities can understand.
But it is a complicated picture. We had a day on it last week and I got headache. It is just so complicated, and then you look at this set of metrics and then there's another set of metrics. And actually I think one of the challenges for us is how can you reflect all of that that's out there in a way which people can understand in their lived lives. What does it actually mean? So when somebody says 54 decibels or and you go up by 10 and it's a doubling, well, most people can't handle that because that's logarithm rather than a linear scale. And the reality is you've got to come up with a way that people can share how they feel about the noise, and that is reflected in the sort of data that's out there. Because we've seen it, we've seen documents, and you get handed a document, well there you go, there's all the data, and you're looking at it, you know, this is making more sense to me if I turn it upside down. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And I think there's a real challenge there as to how can you reinterpret that data in a way in which people can understand it in the way in which they live their lives.
Well, I think we can interpret it every single morning being woken up out of sleep.
Precisely.
With a headache.
Precisely. What does that mean in terms of when somebody comes at you with a book of stats?
But
How does it relate?
there's a misconception that people being informed with data about noise, or 10 decibels meaning twice the noise, etc., is going to somehow make them live with the noise more easily, and it's not. You know, this is I think that a lot of people in the industry, and yourselves perhaps, feel that informing us will help us. But it's not really going to, because we just can't bear the noise, you know.
Yeah, I think it's more about, we have to have that level playing field as to how data is shared. I think the one factor you can't properly measure is the individual impact. And the way different people hear that noise or how to put up with that noise is the impact on the effect on their lives is different. And that is how we need to make sure that is not lost in the technical discussions. And I'll produce another noise map then, Charlie.
And there's a clear message from many of our members as well, that they actually want the data to present the noise information back to you or back to the airport in a way that may differ from the way the airport presents it to them. Yeah.
We're not saying don't produce the full data and release that in a way, but we're actually also saying make it in a format that more people can engage with, rather than just experts.
Tim, on that whole question of how do people feel about noise and that sort of thing, there was a study called ANASI, which was done after the Heathrow Terminal 5 inquiry inspector said we need to get a better understanding of how people feel about noise. The DfT let a contract to consultants. They came out with a feeling that people were disturbed by frequency and issues like that rather than actual noise. Now, I think when you're reviewing sonar, you need to review ANASI as well, because it didn't see the light of day in any great way because DfT didn't like what it said.
Yeah.
So they employed one of the consultants who didn't get the contract to rubbish the work of the other consultant. If you've ever seen anything more dishonest out of DfT, that was it. I was actually on the steering committee and Tim was as well on ANASI. And yes, some of it wasn't very robust, but that general feeling that it's disturbance, not just noise levels, was very strongly coming out of all their research work. So I commend you to another bit of breakfast reading.
Okay, Jim, we'll take that one as a comment. So we'll just finish off on the two other questions that have come in. So this is addressed to all of you, I think, in terms of the visits you've made to airports so far. But the question is, can you give us an example of some good practice you've encountered in an airport so far? Are you prepared to recommend?
Difficult to sort of name names at this stage. I think that'll be hard. But I think we've seen a number of airports who've learned from
the
their
questions
experiences.
anonymous, so maybe the airport can be anonymous too. So
there was one airport we went to, and it was an early visit, and they were they actually went. They've been guided as what to do by some consultants, and they went out to the community, and the information they'd been given was wrong, and they were genuinely upset by the fact that they'd actually let their community down by the information they'd given them, and they wanted to get it right. And I thought that was actually powerful. They felt they owned that relationship in a way that, you know, we haven't seen in other places.
Absolutely not.
So that was one good example. I think progress could be said in terms of Heathrow. About the drop-in sessions that Heathrow have done have certainly given more information to more people.
Well,
this
depends where
information
those
to more
drop-in
people.
sessions are, and if you ask for
Yeah,
them,
and I
you
think
get
I was just
them.
going to say, and the learning point for them is, and we put this to them directly. That's all very well, but why didn't you put other drop-in sessions in the areas where it was pretty obvious there would have been more people wanting to go to them? And so I think
People were turned away anyway.
Yeah.
People were turned away from those sessions. You couldn't get in if you hadn't booked by whenever it was.
I walked into one straight away without a problem.
Gatwick, for
When I
example.
found it.
Gatwick, for example, they held theirs where there was no flight pass, no
Yeah.
noise issues.
And that's why I think our guidance is going to be really important, because if you miss an area, even if it's just one area, then it just rubbishes the whole process, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's not in their interest to sort of to avoid having a drop-in session, letting that thing somewhere like.
It's in their interest because they just railroad something over
Well,
you, but you're
that's where it was before, and I think the climate now is, and what we're saying is, if you want your consultation exercise to be as legitimate, that's not commenting on the results of that, but the exercise, you have to convince us that it's comprehensive. And even CAA have actually rejected a number of airspace modernisation proposals, even one this week, because that consultation has not been comprehensive enough. And there was one announced today that they rejected.
And I think we've got a real role there there is genuine best practice out there. There is an Institute for Public Consultation that talks about how you engage. And I think what we can do is create a benchmark, and that then allows you to say to the operators, well, if this is the benchmark, you're not doing it this way. So you yourselves get to challenge back with more information about what best practice is. And we've certainly gone through quite a lot of what's been going out there, and then certainly Rob and I, and we sort of reflect back, don't we, some of what we've seen in local government, and we're saying, well, we moved on from that 20 years ago. So I think there's a real opportunity to actually talk about the best practice that is out there as to how to engage, and then to allow you to use that to hold them to account as well as ourselves.
that assumes that we all know these different organisations that we can tap into, but the fact is we don't.
No, well that I think is our space in as much as we do, and we can then bring that to the fore in our best practice so that you can benefit from it.
Okay, I'm going to give you one last question from our online viewers. It's the $1 million question. So it's neighbours in my community are concerned about the decisions airports may take to either concentrate or disperse flight paths. Does ICCAN have a view on this?
I think the view we would take is that there will be a different solution across airports. There will not be a uniform solution across the country, and that has to be a decision that comes about through a proper engagement with the different communities, and it's not an easy answer. We will make observations of that, but we would not recommend to any airport either course, because I think it's a swings and roundabouts decision.
Do you have a feeling, maybe it's unfair at this stage, but do you have a feeling whether the decision about which is the best approach in each locality, should that come very much from the community that's impacted, or does it come from the airport?
I think it has to come from both. I think the communities have got, it may be a situation where people would accept that actually that was a better for the whole community. It may not be, for it to be concentrated. I couldn't imagine, but that's not for us to decide. That has to be, something for that community to decide. But it has to be the whole community and not just not one group within that.
But what about those flight paths concentrated over the city? Poor people who are now living permanently under two particular flight paths. Why should they be suffered? Why have they been chosen?
Well, I mean that's looking at the detail, but there may be flight paths that would affect only a small number of people, and then that might be something that there will be a lot of support for. But actually, it's hard to actually, without looking at the detail of each airport proposal, then make a judgment on that.
Peter, can you keep this one quick? 'Cause I wanted to come to the right hand side of the room. But
can I make a suggestion that there actually is a huge gap in the government's noise objectives. There is no objective to allocate noise across communities, and we, are not just us, but the folk around Heathrow, propose both to the Heathrow and the CAA a universal, we think, fair objective, which they both totally rejected themselves. The objective is, if you're reducing noise through quieter aircraft, then the benefit of that should go to those who are currently most affected. If you're increasing the noise, for example, with a third runway, then that noise should go to those least affected at the moment. That if you ask people about that, that seems to have almost universal support. But that objective is missing, and we strongly recommend we think, and we've written a lot about it on our website.
It's one of the areas that we are looking at.
Sarah, you had your hand up.
Sarah Clayton, Airport Watch, and also work with the No Third Runway Coalition. Just a suggestion. You might find you get on better with communities if you talk about less noisy planes rather than quieter. Because quieter is a neutral word used by the industry, and it simply means you're using the greenwash. So please don't say quieter. It seems that my understanding is you were set up because of the Airports Commission and trying to get the Heathrow runway through with minimal opposition. And it's taken 2 years longer than it should have been done to set you up, and therefore you'll be set up and make your recommendations too late for it to be effective in the Heathrow plan, which has been the government's plan all the way along, so you couldn't get in there to do anything useful before the runway is inflicted upon us. The consultation you talk about community. There is no such thing as community at Heathrow. Heathrow is surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of different areas, all of which are overflowing. With their consultations, they ask whether people want concentration or dispersal. And all this means, and what the airports love, is it sets one area against another, so they have divide and rule, and nobody can agree because everyone says, please not over me, and therefore they go straight ahead with the plan they had initially, because they know there is no way they can please everybody. They set people at each other, and it's very difficult for groups to be able to be magnanimous enough to share the noise and not say, please not over me. And when you say everybody must be treated the same, Heathrow is an entirely different case to anywhere else. It is not the same to have one plane every 10 minutes over your head at 2,000 feet, as to have one plane every minute or less at that height over your head. It is not the same, and it cannot and should not be regarded the same. What I've learned from mental health issues is that people are most stressed by issues that come upon them and hit them suddenly, about which they can do nothing, and there is nobody who will help, like getting cancer or your partner suddenly abandoning you. Aircraft noise overhead is like that. You're fine, and then one day you wake up and a flight path has been put over your head. This happened to Sally at CAGNY, and that is how CAGNY started and all the airport groups began, due to Sally's lead. One day Gatwick put flights over Sally's house, and Sally was not having any of it, and Sally was a fighter. But other people have wilted. People already with existing mental health fragility are wilted. They can do nothing about it. They can't change it, and nobody they approach will help them. As Maureen said, it takes at least a 2-year consultation to put something back again. You are going to subject hundreds of thousands of people in the Heathrow area around London to noise which could be at the level to make people ill. This runway must be opposed. There's already too much noise generated by Heathrow, and should the DfT have done this thing properly, they'd have set up a body earlier on to oppose the runway in the first place. You cannot subject hundreds of thousands of Londoners to the amount of extra noise they're going to be subjected to, because you won't have the powers to stop it. All you can do is try and pussyfoot around and push it in different places. The consultation came to my area in Epsom. They had one of their consultations, the last consultation Heathrow had, and all they said was, can you tell us some areas where the noise shouldn't be? Fine. I gather one racing stable near Newmarket got dispensation because the racehorses didn't get on with the noise. That simply means the noise goes over somebody else. I could say, please don't put it over our racing stables in Epsom. That just means it gets put a mile to the west or the east. It's not a solution. It's purely divide and rule. Please be aware of the issues of this. I'm about the passion, but I feel strongly.
Thank you very much.
A lot of issues in there. Forgive me if I don't respond to all of them, but I mean, I think the issue in terms of communities being set against each other is something which we want to try and help so that doesn't happen, because actually the divide and rule is something airports have been very effective at using.
Yes.
And I don't think that it works if that happens. So where we can bring communities together to overcome that, then we will try and do that. I know it's difficult, but if we've got more common ground, at the end of the day, that's what we need to try and do, because divide and rule does not work in terms of long-term outcomes. I understand how you feel. We are not doing this. We're trying to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. We are independent of DFT. Yes, they fund us, but we've got a very clear remit to be independent. And as a team of commissioners, if we defend nothing else, we will defend that independence. And I think that it will give us a much more clout in the future to make those challenges to everybody, really. I think at the end of the day, the progress we will make, we will find frustrating as a team. I can guarantee that, because we want to do more and we want to do it quicker. But we have to be prepared to actually work longer and harder to get those to make changes, which will take time to come along. But we are determined to do that, and we know we will get doors slammed in our faces from time to time from various bodies, but that's never stopped us before, gentlemen, has it? And won't stop us in the future. And that's why we see this very much in a case of we're playing a long game here. And I know people would like it to be a shorter game, but it has to be a longer game if we're going to get the real changes we need for the future.
Stephen, we'll take a last question from Kate on the end. I promised, or ICCAN promised you to wrap up by 9, and we will. So I'm going to give Kate the floor and Kate, introduce yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully it'll bring together kind of some of these themes that we're sort of starting to touch on now, kind of right at the end. So I think my question is, thinking about some of the things that Sarah's spoken about, I think that these kind of views actually are shared by a lot of our members and frustrations in terms of not feeling sure about how far you as a body feel you can go in criticising or challenging government policy decisions. And I think, as we've touched on several times tonight, what in some people's minds has been a big decision around Heathrow, in terms of the government's mind at least, has been taken, that opportunity is passed. The thing that's now on the big policy agenda is around airspace modernisation. Can you, as an organisation, imagine ever turning to government and saying, do you know what, our view is that this whole programme of airspace modernisation has too bad an impact in terms of noise and therefore should be halted? Because that is the desire, I know, of many of our member groups.
You're right in terms of, we are where we are in terms of being here in the process of other things. But we were not set up to oppose Heathrow extension. It's not our remit, extension. In terms of airspace modernisation, there will be a mixed bag of solutions. We have to be convinced that the proposals that come forward as a collective are going to deliver enough benefits. And I don't know whether that's going to be right or wrong at this stage. We have to keep an open mind. We understand the objectives. Is noise high enough up those objectives? At this stage, I would say no. But that isn't the end of the story. We would want to see noise benefits being shown, demonstrated, with the proposals that come forward. And then we would take a view. So just comes out, we'll sort stacking out. We want more than that. We want to see real noise benefits from the changes, and we accept it won't be for everybody, but as a collective for each airport, we would want, if the airspace modernisation doesn't deliver, at least someone getting a benefit, then there's something wrong with it.
Well, just on very, we have with Heathrow just 6 months. The game will be over in 6 months' time. It will, because they're consulting, excuse my voice, next month.
Yeah.
And then it'll go into the DCO process, and it'll be too late. They're designing these envelopes in a ridiculous manner. It's not going to affect us at all. It's not going to help us at all. This game is nearly in its end game with us on this airspace, and the airspace change process that's going on roughly all through the CAA for another 2 years. That'll be far too late.
Airspace modernisation will not go for 2 years. It will go probably take up most of the next decade. It's supposed to be all complete by the mid-20s. It won't be. It's too complex for that. People might not like saying that, but I think that's just practical reality with any major process like this. We are very conscious that you can't conclude what you do for Heathrow without concluding the rest of the south of England, because there are consequences. And we will be, I think we would be prepared to call foul if we felt that the Heathrow plan had been sorted and then they were fixing everybody else's around Heathrow. Because we can tell you that all the other airports have got severe concerns that that could be the situation, and that can't be right. And if you sort Heathrow in that terms and then just leave other airports in a difficult position, then that can't be the right solution. So we'll want to see a proper comprehensive plan that means that works for everybody, not just for Heathrow getting everything it wants. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's wrap up the discussion there. I wanted to ask you a question actually. So most of your challenges and questions to the commissioners have been around deliverability. They've been around, the potential pitfalls and will it make a difference. But actually what represented to you early on was the strategic vision. Nobody challenged that. I didn't hear any challenges to that. Do you think that what you've seen tonight feels about right in terms of direction and the sense of objective? I know deliverability is your concern, but do they feel like the right areas? That's something to go away and think about, and to respond to the consultation if you haven't already done so. But I think that's hopefully something that you've been able to convey tonight is where you would like to take this and the key areas you would like to challenge on. Okay, so I'm going to say thank you to Howard, to Colin, to Simon, and to you, Brooke, for answering the questions. And I think on behalf of all the audience, thanks to Sam and the Secretariat team as well for organising tonight's event and giving us the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you once again to you too. Keeping us all in order.